This is Buying Miami, Life, Love, and Real Estate. And I am your host, JoAnne Jones. I'm a second-generation Miamian, and I am obsessed with real estate. And also living your best life here in the best city, Miami. Today's my birthday.
Happy birthday,
Thank
JoAnne.
you. I'm 49 years old.
Wow,
I'm
you
super
look
excited.
so much younger. Good for you, girl.
Listen, from your lips to God's ears, okay? It takes a lot of work. But also, like, I don't want it, like, people don't know the actual day, right? Because we're just going to put this out, which is good because I don't have my birthday on social media because I don't like everyone, oh, happy birthday. Right. So then I have to respond to everyone, just like the people in my life that know, you know?
Yes.
They know.
Yes.
But so anyways, okay, so it's super exciting. Like, that's extra exciting today.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so Lexi Goza. Yes. I met Lexi a few years ago when one of my childhood friends, Carla, was working for you.
Yes.
And basically, Carla has been writing insurance forever. So wherever Carla is at, that's where I get my insurance from.
Yeah,
so Carla was with you. She moved away now.
Yeah.
And I had to get homeowners insurance.
Yeah.
And so I got to meet you and get to know you. And we did that awful yoga class at one time that I almost threw up.
It wasn't awful. It was just really hot.
Carla's like, hey, you want to go on a 5-mile run? She's always coming up with, and I'm like, no, Carla, no, I'm not going. Yes. Anyways, we digress. Yeah. So you own State Farm, Lexi Goza, State Farm insurance. So you provide agency and you provide all kinds of insurance. Correct. And you wrote the homeowners insurance section of Buying Miami.
Yes.
So then this podcast is like, I've been bringing each of the contributors in to kind of bring to life and have a deeper conversation about homeowners insurance. And I'll tell you, I've been doing this 18 years and I'm still like confused about homeowners insurance myself.
Yes.
And my buyers, my clients want me to know everything about everything and I just don't. So I usually try to divert them to you. But I mean, homeowners insurance is a tricky thing. So, but before we unpack that, like, tell them a little bit about who you are. How'd you get into it? How do you have your own agency?
Yeah.
Like, what's your deal?
So first and foremost, I want to thank you. Obviously, I mean, you know, we do go back a ways and I was super honored to be asked to contribute to the book. So again, thank you for that. And the first time my words have been published. So that's amazing. And then, so, you know, basically I've been in Miami since 2017. Mm-hmm. I still feel like a newbie. Which I don't know if you can move anywhere else and still feel like you're still new because there's so much to discover in Miami, right? So I moved down after I got divorced and my kids were already off and doing their own thing. And I was working for State Farm. So I've been in the insurance and financial services industry for about 20 plus years, most of that time as an employee with State Farm. And so the dream kind of always was become your own agent, right? Entrepreneurship. So with a State Farm agency, I'm an independent contractor. So I run my business the way that I want to, obviously within the parameters of State Farm's framework. Sure. But I opened my agency in 2019, and it's been an incredible experience. I had no way to predict just the amount of experience and success that I've been able to have since opening, and it's just been fantastic. So, I'm super excited to be here, like I said, and looking forward to diving into it.
Okay, great. So. There's a lot to unpack. I don't even know if we're going to be able to get it all done in 30 minutes. Right. Usually we don't, but I want to give people like enough information to realize that they have no idea what they know and what they don't know. And then also just give them resources on where they could learn more because people get blindsided when it comes to getting insurance and they get blindsided on how much it is. Yeah. And it's scary because you don't want to be without insurance.
That's right.
And it's not something that you want to skimp on. Yeah. So the first time that we start talking about insurance is during the inspection period in the contract. So you have a buyer, they have a property under contract, and we have to do the inspection. Yeah. And during the inspection, I always like every realtor, we order the inspection of the property and then the 4 points and the wind mitigation. And I know that I need those two things because I know that the next step is after the inspection period, they're going to start getting quotes for homeowners insurance, which most buyers are getting a mortgage.
Right.
So if they are getting a mortgage, they have to have homeowners insurance.
Correct.
If they're buying cash, it's more of a choice, but I don't see why they wouldn't have homeowners insurance. It's like, why wouldn't you have homeowners insurance on your property?
Right.
But it's not like they're not legally bound to it the way that when you're getting a mortgage.
Correct.
So you're getting a mortgage, and I know that, well, basically all I know is that the insurance, the company that's going to be quoting the insurance needs the 4 point and the wind mitigation reports in order to quote the insurance.
Right.
So let's dive into that a little bit. Like, why is it called 4 points? What do the 4 points mean? And why do you need those two reports? And what are they and what do they mean? And why do you need them in order to quote insurance? You're up.
Okay. All right. So, gosh, scintillating topic area, right?
Riveting information over
so
here.
Exciting.
So exciting.
Yes. So, yes, you're exactly right, JoAnne. So most insurers are going to require, especially for homes that are aged, that
what considers a home at age? Because like, is it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What's an aged home?
Yeah. So anything that's going to be over 10 years is you're going to be required to get the wind mitigation and the 4 point inspection. So when you look at those two reports, one, the 4 point is really about the rating of the home, right? So what condition is it in? And then the wind mitigation is really speaking to discounts. So what kinds of things have been done to mitigate the risk of a loss during a wind situation, whether it's a named storm or not. And of course, in Florida, that's very, we deal with that all the time, right? So hurricane season is starting up again. And so everybody at that point takes a look at their insurance, right? So the wind mitigation really is all about discounts. So if you've done things like added shutters to your home, if you have provided opening protection, if your windows are a certain rating for wind protection, all of those things are going to show up on the wind mitigation, and those are going to provide you discounts on the rate that you're getting from your insurer. Then the 4 point is really looking at the age of the main systems in the home. So the electrical, the plumbing, the heating, the AC. So that's why it's 4 points, right? Heating is 1, AC is 2, plumbing is 3, electric is 4.
Okay.
So all of those systems, right, they age over time. And if they're not maintained well, then they're going to age and claims are going to happen because they're going to break down. So that's why the insurance company is looking at that 4 point inspection for older homes. Yeah.
Okay.
Demystification there for you.
Okay. And so then, so I know, like, for example, they need to have like hurricane impact windows.
Right.
That's going to lower their...
that's on the wind mitigation.
Yep. Okay. So you have those two reports, and then where do you go from there?
So once we have the reports, basically we have a tool that we plug in the data. And specifically for the wind mitigation, we plug in the data and it spits out like a discount factor. And then that's what applies the discount. For the 4 point, that goes through underwriting. So we don't handle that part of it. It goes off to the underwriters and they take a look at everything and make sure that it's, number one, eligible for coverage, because obviously in a situation where systems haven't been maintained and there are issues with the home, then an insurer is less likely to want to insure it because it's a higher risk, right? And then in Florida, obviously, we deal with just like eligibility issues from the jump based on your address. Because when you look at, a home that's on the ocean, that has a higher risk of being damaged during a storm than a home, say, in Doral, right?
Right.
And so the initial part of getting the homeowner's quote is finding out who you have the eligibility through first, right? And that's when we get into the other carriers like Citizens and the smaller takeout companies. So in the state of Florida, just in the past year alone, 6 smaller companies have gone insolvent because they were not charging enough rate to be able to pay their claims and keep their promises.
Right.
So that's where you end up. We have a lot of policies in South Florida that are with Citizens because those smaller companies did not charge enough rate, and then they were deemed insolvent by the state, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, so then you get those 2 reports.
Yes.
And so why is it so freaking expensive?
So exactly what I just said, right? So yes, it is expensive to insure your home in Florida. And I think, one of the things that we were talking about prior to the show is we're seeing a lot of situations where somebody's going in, a buyer's going in, right, to purchase a home, and they're getting the settlement of closing. So that shows, what all the closing costs are going to be, inclusive of your insurance premiums, right? And a lot of individuals are seeing low ball numbers in the insurance piece, and then they get to the closing table and they realize their insurance premium is going to be 3 times what they were quoted originally. And that can make your deal fall apart, as you've said. Yeah,
I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
So how can buyers, and what would you advise to buyers and realtors to mitigate this situation? Like, how can we have a better, more accurate estimate on what the insurance is going to be?
So I guess my recommendation would be, to take averages from your prior sales and customers who've actually gotten a quote.
Do that. Can't do that.
Say more.
Because let's say I do 15 deals a year.
Right.
And they're all over the place. And one's a single family home in Pinecrest, and the other one's a condo on Miami Beach, and the other one is a townhouse in Doral. So they're all in different places all over. So it's not like, okay, listen, if I sold 5 homes or 5 condos in the same building, then yes, I could.
Right.
But since the homes are in all different places and are different types of properties, I can't average it like that.
So I hear what you're saying. So I'm going to give an example. So there's a website out there that's very beneficial for people who are looking to purchase homes or anything else for that matter. It's called bankrate.com.
Bankrate, okay.
And I've used it for so many things, including negotiating with used car salespeople, which I love, right? So I show them the numbers. I'm like, no, I'm not paying more than this, right? But there is an issue when you look at that particular website for calculating the cost of what it's going to take to purchase a new home. When you plug in information for South Florida, your normal insurance rate, it doesn't matter, right? If you're you're not going to be paying $300 a year, which is what Bankrate is putting on as your estimated annual insurance rate. I don't know where they're pulling that number from, because I haven't seen a $300 annual premium for insurance since I lived in Minnesota, and that was 20 years ago. So I hear what you're saying. However, I would counter that by saying you're going to get a whole lot closer to an accurate number if you're taking actual numbers from the market, right? Even though they are hugely different. Now, you don't want to compare apples to oranges, right? So I would take condos as one category, single family homes as another category, and then pulling your estimates from there rather than, just a flat number of $300 a year, which is totally not even anywhere near what people are going to pay for insurance in this state.
I mean, I know that some of my more savvy buyers are going to ask me about, let's look up the flood zone of this property that we're looking at to see if we're in a high flood zone or, because they know that that's going to affect their insurance.
Of course.
Can you speak to that? Like, would that be a way? Or is there can we start calling you from the get-go? I mean, you're going to hate us.
Be careful what you wish for sometimes, right?
Should we be calling the insurance agent, in the inspection period to start to kind of get an idea?
Absolutely, 100%.
Because at least if we call during the inspection period and, we could give them basic information like the house was built in, 2020 and it's in this flood zone and this is how much it is and then you could start to get a ballpark of what the insurance would be, correct?
Absolutely. So we run into this all the time where a person, a buyer has known that their closing date is a week away for 2 months, and they're just now contacting us to get insurance on the property, which, you know, I don't know if you've noticed, but there are a lot of people who've moved into South Florida in the last year and a half, right? Mm-hmm. We've gotten tons of people moving in from California, New York. And so our quoting process takes at least 48 hours. So a buyer coming to us the day before they're closing, they're not going to be able to get insurance on that property if they wait till the last minute, right?
That's a bad realtor. I mean,
I'm not saying anything about anybody professionally. I'm
just saying. But also, I mean, that's like a realtor or a transaction coordinator who is not on the ball but usually it's a mortgage broker that's harassing us for insurance.
They're really good at that, right?
Yeah. Usually it's the mortgage broker who's like, where's your insurance? We need the insurance. Where's the insurance quote? Blah, 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 blah.
I did mortgage processing once upon a time, many, many years ago. So I remember what that's like.
I did it for a minute. And I hated it.
Yeah. It's rough.
Yeah, no, I can't.
It's not an easy job. But you bring me back to another good point. I know we wanted to touch on the new requirements for citizens in Florida. Yes. And so you mentioned flood. And I think a common misunderstanding, and we saw this during Katrina and other large storms, a huge misunderstanding is that people think when they purchase their homeowners insurance that it includes flood coverage, right? And there are a lot of damages that happen during named storms that would be considered flood damage, right? Mm-hmm. So when you saw all of the flooding that happened in New Orleans after Katrina, State Farm actually paid out billions of dollars in flood claims, even though our insurance policies don't cover flood. Flood is covered at the national level, and it's NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program. And that's what it's intended to do, is to cover flood losses, right? And so now that we're coming into this new phase of many less options in the market for people in terms of insurance carriers, Citizens has gone to, probably learning from the Katrina catastrophe and others, that they are going to require now, if you are in a flood zone and you're getting homeowners insurance through Citizens, you have to also have a flood policy with the National Flood Program in place to be able to close on that property. And that just went into effect on April 1st, which from my perspective, JoAnne, and you can chime in on this, I'm grateful that they're making this change so that we don't then end up in a Katrina situation with our homes destroyed and no recourse, right? On the other hand, I think anytime there's a change, it's a pendulum swing, right? So we're over here to the left and everything's good and nobody has to have flood insurance. And now they are swinging to the right and everybody has to have flood insurance no matter where you live. And so we're seeing, as you said, 6th floor condos that are being required to have flood insurance, right? Mm-hmm. Which is just kind of crazy when you think about it. But it is what it is. From my perspective, overall, it was a good move by Citizens.
Okay. And so also, I kind of feel like insurance is one of those things that you don't want to it's not a place that you want to cut corners.
Agreed.
But I think people a lot of times don't really understand what they're being covered for. Yeah. And they think that they're getting covered for more than they are.
Yes.
And so they see two policies and one's, $575 and the other one is $725. And they're like, well, I want the $525. But they don't realize that for like a couple $100 more, you're getting, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars more coverage.
Right.
So can you speak to maybe some of the essentials, like things like, hey, you don't want to skimp on this. Make sure that you have, enough of this or enough of that. And I mean, you think about your contents, right? Yeah. You think about if you have friends over, somebody gets drunk, they break the coffee table, they broke their arm, in your house. And then, that happens in Florida.
Of course. Especially in Miami.
Just saying. And then now they want to sue you or they want to take advantage of your homeowner's insurance. So you have people that are like getting injured in your house.
Right.
You have theft.
Yeah.
You have obviously like a hurricane can come and mess your stuff up. Yeah. And even on a higher floor, on hurricane, sometimes you have like water coming in.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I've had issues with that before too. So with all that being said, what are some of the things like what are your pro tips on insurance? Like, hey, listen, make sure you have this or don't skimp here.
Right. So great questions. So, at my agency, we take pride in educating customers, which is not always the case, right? Most of the time, people are just getting a quote for the cheapest possible option. In my office, each and every person is trained to understand how each coverage works and how to explain it to a customer. So to your point, we've seen specific situations, and we talk about it in the book, right? Where we had one customer who came to us and showed us a quote from a competitor, and we were able to see that just for $200 more a year, they were getting $94,000 in extra dwelling coverage that would have helped them in a situation like you said, right? So your neighbor's bathtub overflows, right? And all of a sudden you've got water coming into your unit and your stuff is ruined. And in the case of if they had just gone with price and not come across our agency to be educated, they would have been out all of their expensive furnishings, all of their content. And so, it's incredibly expensive. And so line by line, you really need to go through the coverages and make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. So you mentioned someone getting hurt, right? So there's medical payments to others. Typically it's between $2,000 and $5,000. I call that a relationship saver coverage, right? So you've got somebody over, they get injured. Obviously, we want to make sure we take care of them and that it doesn't turn into a litigation situation, right? So the last thing we want is for somebody to be at your house, a friend of yours, a neighbor, whatever, and then they feel like their only recourse to get back to where they were is to sue you. Well, shoot, now you're no longer friends, I'm sure, right? So so we call that medical payments to others is the relationship saver. And there are other coverages as well. So I would say one of the biggest mistakes that I see is that a lot of carriers will quote you without wind coverage and not even mention it. So think about that.
Oh?
Yeah. So when
what does that mean?
Right. So no wind means if there's a named storm, any damage that comes from that hurricane, you will not be covered for at all.
So this is a very real situation. Like you live in a condo.
Yeah.
And somebody didn't secure their balcony furniture.
Right.
And it comes crashing through your living room sliding glass door.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So if you don't have wind insurance, then that won't be covered.
Correct.
Jeez Louise. Yeah. I got to make sure I have wind insurance. I'm nervous.
Yes. Yeah. And then the other piece is deductibles, right? Okay. So every time that you look at a homeowner's policy in Florida, you should see 2 deductibles. If you don't have 2 deductibles, then you don't have hurricane coverage. So if you have only 1 deductible, that's your all peril deductible, right? And that means anything else that could happen, fire, water that comes in from somebody else's unit, theft, all of those things. And so if you only have the 1 deductible, you're not covered for wind. And so you need to reach out to your provider and find out how you can add it. And most of the time, you can't change your coverages midstream. So if you figure out 6 months into your policy period that you don't have wind and there's a named storm coming, guess what? You can't change it until your policy renewal.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess I think that the takeaway here is that even after listening to this podcast and me doing the podcast, I'm still like, wow, there's a lot that I don't know.
Well, I'm in the industry and I'm still learning new things every day. So,
but I think it's one of those things where people need to really kind of, pay attention to the insurance aspect of it.
Right.
And make sure that they understand what they're getting in their policy and have a relationship with your insurance agent where you could sit down and get a few quotes, but understand that, okay, if this is, $300 less than the other one, what are you not getting?
That's right.
What are you not getting for that extra $300? Because you're comparing apples. You're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to oranges, and you need to understand what you're going to be covered for. And it's a little intimidating, quite honestly, because you're walking into a situation and you don't know what any of this means.
That's right.
But let me tell you, when you need it and you realize you don't have it, that's a very scary thing. And I don't know. I just feel like when it comes to insurance, it's just not something that you want to nickel and dime on. Like if you're going to spend an extra $200, I mean, we spend an extra $200 going to lunch.
Right.
So, I mean, it's really not somewhere you want to skimp on. So let's go on. What are some other things that I love the way that you laid out what you wrote about, like the myth and the myth busters, because you're formatting in the book. And this is homeowners insurance. What you need to know is on page 77 and through 80 on the book Buying Miami, the must-have guide to purchasing a home. It's on Amazon. It's only like $15. It's no big deal, but it really is just really goes into a lot. So what are some of the other things, like you have the platform here, what are things that like you wish that people knew about homeowners insurance? Like you need to know this if you're going to get into buying in Florida.
Yeah. So I think earlier you asked, what are the things that people can do to help cut down costs? And I would say, bundling your insurance is always a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. So if you already have car insurance and you're looking to buy a home, you'll want to go to the same person that carries your car insurance, because more than likely they're going to offer you a discount for having more than one policy.
Okay.
So I would say that first and foremost. And then secondly, I think the piece that gets overlooked a lot is the liability piece, right?
Okay, and let's talk about that.
So most policies will include a personal liability limit of anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000, and $300,000. So when that comes into play is we go back to that topic of somebody got hurt on your property, right? Mm-hmm. Or you caused injury to somebody. Most of the time, what's going to end up happening is the insurance company is going to write a check, right? Mm-hmm. For whatever your liability limit is.
So you said, I'm sorry, you said, first you said 1,000 to 3,000. And then you said, is it 1,000? It's 100,000 to 300,000. Because I'm thinking, if mofo broke their arm in your house, I mean, and you go to Mount Sinai ER, it's going to be a little bit more than $3,000.
Right,
I mean, they pay you, they charge you $1,000 for an aspirin. So, I mean,
that's so true. $1,000 isn't going to go very far. Right?
So, but you're saying if somebody gets injured on your property, then the normal limits or what you would have is between 100,000 and 300,000, right? Okay, yes. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of cross over and also use an example from auto insurance as well. So when you're driving up 95, right, and we go between Miami and Fort Lauderdale all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're driving up 95, how many billboards do you see in between Miami and Fort Lauderdale that say, oh, such and such attorney got me $500,000, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where, in Florida, we have 70% of all of the claims that go to litigation across the country. Mm-hmm. In our one state, 70%. Mm-hmm. Whereas it's a much smaller percentage. I think we have like 10% of the overall claims, but 70% of the litigation that happens in claims.
Why?
And that's due to all of the easy money guarantees that attorneys are providing. Right? They're doing their work and they got to do their job. And I respect that. You got to get paid. Right. But at the end of the day, like they're stirring the pot and making people think, oh, I can get money for nothing. Right. Mm-hmm. So that drives up the insurance cost because at the end of the day, we're paying out on those claims. Mm-hmm. Right. And so when you look at a policy that provides $100,000 of liability coverage, 99.9% of the time, that's not going to cover a lawsuit. Right. And so that's when you need to be looking at line by line your coverages and make sure that, at the end of the day, whatever you have at risk is acceptable to you. So you mentioned earlier about how some people won't get insurance, right, if they don't have a mortgage. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in that case, we call that self-insuring, mm-hmm. right? So if you're somebody who has enough capital to replace your entire home without having to pay insurance, then yeah, by all means, go without insurance. Sure. But if you're somebody who's like, you know what, if there's a claim and I go to court, I want State Farm or whatever the insurance company is to pay for my legal fees, to make sure that I don't have any out of pocket where I'm going to end up with wages garnished. Because that's what happened to me as a kid. I caused an accident and my wages were garnished. And I was working a part-time job going to high school. Right.
Wow.
So it can happen. It is very real. And a lot of people don't understand how their insurance can make or break a situation. You know,
For sure.
it can be either a devastation or just a frustration. And we're here to turn it into a frustration from a devastation.
Right.
Yeah.
And another thing I'm wondering about is, you know, Miami's a pretty flashy place and people have a lot of expensive things.
That's right.
And so how does your homeowner's insurance cover you from, let's say you get, you know, broken into, like what if your car gets broken into or somebody breaks into your house and I have a girlfriend of mine that her housekeeper stole all her bags.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and Pinecrest, she went out of town and the housekeeper had access to the house and she had, you know, a lot of expensive bags and the housekeeper stole all her stuff.
Oh my gosh. So there again, it's a good idea to find somebody who's bonded and insured when you're hiring somebody to work in your house. But we don't always do that, right? Because, you know, cost. So I would say a couple of things come into play there. Obviously, deductible is going to come into play. And so you want to make sure that that's not crazy high. And then obviously the deductible is the amount that you have to pay. So just like health insurance, right?
Yeah.
That's what you are required to pay out on your claim before your insurance company will write the first check. The second piece that comes into play is policy limits, right? So not a lot of people understand what a policy limit is. Basically, it's the limit of what the insurance company will pay on any specific claim. And so when you look at things like collectibles, which bags would fall under that, jewelry, firearms, drones, another great example. Lots of people have drones now. So there are limits on your policy. It could be $1,500, could be $2,000. But when you're talking to somebody who has a bag that's worth 10 grand, $2,000 doesn't go very far to replace that, right? And so in that case, you typically want to look at a separate policy, which for us is called a personal articles policy.
Okay.
And so at that point, you know, you will be required to show proof of value, right? Because it's an agreed value policy.
Sure.
But then at the end of the day, you know for a fact that your stuff is covered, whether it's stolen by somebody that you let into your house or somebody broke in or, you know, could be a kid or a kid's friend. You never know. And and it also covers, you know, items that are taken from your car. And even if you're traveling, for an example, right? So I have I'm not wearing them today, but I have a pair of diamond earrings that I purchased as a congratulations gift for myself after opening my business.
Right.
And of course, I want to make sure that if something happens to them, like I can recoup that and replace them. So I got a policy on those. And actually, I went on a Virgin cruise just recently. Have you been?
Oh my God, don't even get me started.
I know.
Don't even get me started on the Virgin
best,
Cruises.
the
The
best.
best ever.
Yes.
I'm not even a cruiser.
Oh, me
and
either.
we were like living
blown away, right?
amazing, amazing. The Virgin Cruises,
Yes,
amazing.
yes.
Okay,
so
but
I went on a
anyways.
Virgin cruise and it was fantastic. And I thought I lost my earrings. So of course, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to file a claim. It's not going to be a big deal. I'll replace them. Luckily, I found them a couple days later. So
Okay, thank God. That's scary.
But I had that peace of mind, right? To know that, okay, you know, it's not a big deal. It's covered.
Right. So you also had like the wherewithal, like you're an insurance. So, you know, okay, let me make sure that I insurance,
Right.
you know, no, I think about like friends who, you know, I'm a singer and my producer, he has all of his equipment in his house.
Right.
So I think I need to have a conversation with him to make sure that he has all that it properly insured.
Absolutely.
You know, because he has a whole recording studio in the house. So, and I just think about other people and friends that have jewelry and bags and things like to make sure that they have it's called a personal article.
Yep. Personal articles policy. Yep.
No, but even if you know, regardless, people have collectible things, whether if it's sneakers or bags or
watches,
jewelry, watches. So, and they just think that it's covered under like willy nilly covered under my insurance. And then when the shit hits the fan, nothing is covered or it's not covered to the value of your collectible. So
that's right.
That's another.
Everybody's happy with their insurance until either the rate goes up or you have a claim and then you figure out, oh, I'm not covered for that. And who wants to go through that, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's why it's so important to have a good conversation with your provider before you purchase the policy.
And listen, I mean, I think part of adulting
is reading the documents that you're signing.
I'm not going to read shit. No, I'm not going to sit there and read my insurance policy.
No.
I am going to, I think part of adulting is having the wherewithal to sit down with your insurance agent.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's me, like I like to meet people in person. I'm old school that way.
Right.
But to just make sure that you know what you have, what you're covered,
That's
and
right.
you understand. I'm not going to sit there and read a 10-page insurance policy.
No.
I'm just not.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
But I am going to, call you.
Yeah.
And like, I'm even thinking that before I renew my insurance again, that I sit down and we do a little audit of my insurance to make sure that everything is, and a part of it is like, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not fun.
No.
It's not,
It's
like
really not.
that's really boring and I have to pay. Oh, I don't like it. So I avoid it. But,
that's common.
yeah. But really, it's like as I continue to look for ways to level up and little ways to level up in my life, part of it is like, okay, let me find out. Like, I don't even know when my insurance expires.
Right.
I got to look that up now. Like there's so much. I have like 5 things I have to add to my to-do list after meeting with you today. But like look to see when my insurance is expiring,
right?
And then make an appointment with my insurance broker, before, and go over it. And make sure that I understand it and make sure that I'm covered where I need to get covered because we are going into rain. I mean, it's awful out there today, but we're going into hurricane season, in a couple months.
Yep.
And and we see on the news every day how Florida floods like a mofo.
Yeah.
And especially Miami.
Right.
And it's something that we need to look at. But more importantly, though, is when you're in the buying process, it's one of those things that you need to start talking to your insurance broker, from the get-go so they can kind of tell you, they could tell you what you need to look out for.
That's right.
Flood zones is a very big deal.
Yeah.
Like it would be great if you find a place that's not in a flood zone.
Right.
There's this website that you can I just Google it, like Miami-Dade flood zones.
Yes.
And then there's a website that you will be led to that you can put in the address of the property that you're looking for. And it'll tell you what the flood zone category it falls into.
Yes.
So that would be something that as a buyer is looking for property to just Google Miami-Dade flood zone map and, you'll find the website and you could put in the address and see what the flood zone is. But knowing what that is, and maybe if you can find something that's not in a flood zone that you like, that would just lower your insurance premium, correct?
Correct. And I would say too, the other piece of it is, when you talk about the properties that you're looking at purchasing, there are a couple of rules of thumb, like age of the building and location. So you touched on it already, whether it's in a flood zone or not in a flood zone. Mm-hmm. That's not going to affect your rating for the homeowner's insurance rate specifically that it's flood prone, but that more than likely it's closer to the ocean, right? And more than likely going to cause some kind of damage during a named storm. The second piece, like I mentioned, is the age of the home. So when you look at South Florida specifically, because of what we went through with Andrew, the building codes were updated in 94 in South Florida, as opposed to the rest of the state, which is 2004. So that's a huge difference. So as long as you're purchasing a home that is up to the 94 building codes, you're good to go, right? So you're going to find that your insurance is going to increase exponentially every year beyond that. So if you purchase a home that was built in 93, you're obviously going to pay more for insurance than a home that was built in 95.
Ah, you know what? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yes. So, and then when you look at the rest of the state, they're almost a decade behind us.
Right.
Yeah. So super interesting.
Wow. Okay. So let's see. How can people find you? What's your website?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do they find you online? Everybody's going to fall in love with you and you're going to have an influx of business. And your life is just going to get better from being on Buying Miami.
Yes, absolutely. So you can visit my website, specialagent.lexi.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. So my Instagram is Lexi SF Agent and Facebook is just Lexi Goza State Farm. And my phone number is 305-602-1771 if you need a quote.
Okay. Well, And you have a fantastic team too. I mean, your team is awesome.
I'm so grateful for my team. Yes.
And you just moved your office is in North Miami, right? You're on Biscayne and what? Biscayne and what?
110th.
Okay. That's a cool area.
Yeah. For the first 4 years, we were in an office building on Biscayne, but in downtown.
I remember.
So now we're more centrally located.
And you have a storefront, right?
Yes.
You're in a plaza?
It's an office building, but we have an exterior entrance on the first floor. Yeah.
It's by Aldi's, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Often hit that Aldi's on my way home.
I like Aldi's. It's a little ghetto, but I like it.
They have good produce.
The problem is that you need a quarter to get the shopping cart, and I don't have a quarter, so I have to I have to charm my way into getting a shopping cart. It's let me tell you, it's an issue. I usually try to get Aldi's delivered, but okay, we digress.
Yes.
We digress. Yes. Lexi, thank you so much for being here. And basically, there was a lot of nuggets, but what I'm walking away with is that I really need to talk to you more. And I think for buyers, home insurance is it's a tricky little subject.
Yeah.
And it's something that that can blindside you. So the takeaway is get a good, whether if it's Lexi, you do policies all over Florida, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep.
So whether it's you and your team or someone, but really take the time to understand what you're getting and start the insurance process early on during your contract to closing.
Yes.
And one last pro tip is make sure that you have your insurance binded obviously before you close, but I had a big problem where I was going to be able to close early.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But so we were going to close on Thursday, but then everything fell into place and we were going to be able to close on Monday.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yeah.
But we weren't able to close on Monday because my insurance was binded for Thursday.
Right.
So we all had to sit and wait for those 4 days, which was awful.
Yeah.
So just make sure that you get it binded like maybe a week before you're closing. So in case you're able to close early, you're not. See, the thing is that you can't close if you don't have insurance.
That's right.
So binded means that the insurance goes into effect.
Yeah.
So if you tell your agent to bind it on your closing date and then you're able to close early, you won't be able to close early because and then if you try to if you call them and be like, hey, can you bind it for 2 days earlier? They give you this whole BS where they can't because of all the paperwork and red tape and they can't do it. And so then basically you just have to wait for those 2 days.
Yeah, that's a great pro tip, JoAnne, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Follow me for more pro tips.
Yes.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming in. It's been fun.
Yes, absolutely.
We can't make it go more than 30 minutes because after that, they're like, listen, I'm tired of hearing about home insurance.
Right.
I'm confused as it is.
Do we really want to talk about it any longer?
I really don't want. I want to talk to you, but not necessarily about this. But no, it's given us enough information to know that we need to have a really good homeowners insurance agent. So thanks again for coming in. And I think that's it. Everybody, check out Lexi Goza State Farm. You could just Google her as well.
Yeah, that works.
Find her. And we'll thank you.
Thank you, JoAnne. My pleasure.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Bye, guys. And listen, everyone, thank you for listening to Buying Miami, Life, Love, and Real Estate. This is the end of our episode. And follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, my website, which is buyingmiami.net. You can find me on social. I'm JoAnne Jones Miami. Pretty much that's my handle everywhere. On Insta, on Facebook, on YouTube. It's JoAnne Jones Miami.